Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And thank you for tuning in. My name is Huda.
And my name is Mikal.
And you're watching Careers and Panels, the Joys and Challenges and the Path to an Enlightened Future, a panel series by 3 Thaqalain Muslim Association chapters, University of Toronto St. George, University of Toronto Scarborough, and Queen's University. To start off, we wanted to acknowledge the land that we are on. While this event is virtual, we recognize that our universities are situated on the lands of Indigenous nations, specifically the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nations. These territories are included in the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between Indigenous peoples of this land to take care for the land and water and take only from it what one needs, while leaving enough for others. From a Muslim perspective, this doesn't sound too different from the role assigned to us by God to be guardians of the earth and to not be wasteful. We hope that everyone can join us in being mindful of the land and water we all share, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Now we'll move into the panels. We are beyond excited to welcome you to the first Careers and Passions panel event. The purpose of this semester-long Careers and Passions panel series is to showcase a variety of common as well as not so common career paths and hobbies with the aim of guiding our youth in making some of the most important decisions in their lives. We want to expand the horizons of our youth and community while giving them a glimpse into the life of professionals across a variety of careers. We are happy to start off the series with our first panel, The Power of Stories, and flipping the lens on filmmakers and journalists. We have with us two esteemed journalists, Zainab Merchant and Fatima Al-Sayed, and producer/filmmaker Razajan Vedali. So before we actually get into our panel discussion, I'm going to give you a little bit of a biography on each of our panelists. To start off, we'll start off with Raza. Raza is a British Iranian award-winning documentary producer, filmmaker, and writer based in England. He has worked on over 60 short films and documentaries. In 2010, he completed his first master's degree in film production at the London Metropolitan University, and he completed his second master's in Islamic Studies at Middlesex University and Islamic College in London. He is currently researching his PhD, examining the Hollywood representation of the Muslim identity at Loughborough University. He writes about the Muslim identity within mainstream media and is active with inter and intrafaith community work in the UK and globally.
We'd also like to welcome Fatima Sayed, a journalist in the West. As a journalist in the West, Fatima aims to bring more awareness about her community through storytelling. Fatima grew up in Toronto, where she did her undergrad degree in journalism at the University of Toronto and also received a diploma in journalism from Centennial College. She landed 2 internships after graduating. Her first internship was at the National Post, writing stories and working on video content creation for the Financial Post. Her second internship was at CBC Canada's Day 6 radio show and podcast, where she pitched and produced stories. Fatima worked for the CBC before moving to Michigan, where she currently resides with her husband. She's currently working as a freelancer and hosting the professional edition of the U Mentor Talk Show. Fatima is also working with award-winning journalist Zainab Merchant, who we also have here, on the Muslim journalists. As the Muslim journalists, their mission is to shed light on the issues within our Muslim community that are often overlooked in mainstream media. While staying true to their ethics and Islamic beliefs, Fatima and Zainab aim to give information to the generations of Muslims who grew up in the West feeling lost. And of course, we also have with us Zainab Merchant, who's an American journalist, author, and entrepreneur. She is the author of books To Be a Muslim and Princess Siana's Pen, with a 3rd title underway. Zainab is more commonly known by her blog name Zainab Writes, where she speaks about social justice issues, current affairs, and God-centric activism. As a journalist, Zainab is co-founder of the startup media organization, The Muslim Journalists, with Fatima Sayed, where she hopes to bring Muslim voices and issues to light. She's in the final thesis semester of her master's program at Harvard University in Journalism and International Security, and she currently resides in Canada with her husband and 3 children. A warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
So we'll get started first by getting to know each of you a little bit more. And Fatima, let's begin with you. You grew up and you studied and worked in Toronto. Can you tell us about why you entered journalism and what your motivation was?
Initially, I was going to enter engineering or architecture, mostly because those careers were the ones that were, the good careers to go into. I had a lot of artistic skills. I loved storytelling from when I was a kid. I remember diving into books, and just forgetting the world around me until it was Salah time, and my mom came up to me. She's like, "Get up and pray, put down your book." So it was just this sort of, I really looked for the thing that would put all of my skills together, if it was photography, storytelling, reading, writing, and just my curiosity. And that is sort of why I applied to journalism. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important to do and follow the path that your heart really seeks.
Yeah.
Riza, not many Muslim youth think of filmmaking and producing as a viable career for themselves. And I think there may be many reasons for that. So can you tell us how you got into filmmaking and why?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for inviting me onto the show and being with the esteemed guest that you have. I got into filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, a little bit later on in my life. I did my degree for A-level, which is almost like the diploma in the UK. I did do media studies, and I always had a passion about media. But then it was later on when I started my master's degree that I wanted to get a formal education in it. And I actually learned more on the actual making of film after graduating and actually start working on films and documentaries. And I didn't really have a passion for making documentaries. I remember specifically when I did my master's degree in London Metropolitan for filmmaking, I really enjoyed the kind of short films, fiction, drama more in my head than I did documentaries. It's just ironic that afterwards I produce more documentaries than I have fiction and drama. And in those, the whole idea, as Sister Fatima said, was there's the stories kind of interest me, the stories that I like to tell, and the identities I like to represent. And coming from an Iranian background, being raised in the UK, there is this dichotomy between my Iranian identity, my Muslim identity, and my British identity, and the identity I have living here. And how do I fit all of that so it makes sense? So the negative perceptions that are shown in media and films and literature and newspapers and so forth and so on, how do I fit myself? Because they don't reflect me. I don't feel comfortable with them. I don't have those kind of attitudes towards many things that they show negatively about. So it's trying to find myself through media. So almost like therapy, you could say. And hopefully it's developing with the PhD and the more films and documentaries that I'm working on.
MashaAllah. Yeah, it's really interesting when someone's career path sort of evolves with themselves and with their own needs and desires. Zainab, you've also been involved in a lot of diverse work, locally as well as internationally in journalism and in activism. What led you to journalism, and what is its relation to the activism that you do?
So for me, I actually never thought I would be a journalist. Like Fatima, have a very creative side. I loved architecture as well, and I love illustrating and just tapping into that creative side. But it was after I grew up post 9/11. So right when I'd moved to America, I believe a few months later, I just started wearing the hijab, and I was 8, 9 years old, and that's when 9/11 happened. And I think it really changed my life and shaped what I wanted to do. I was very confused as to, not just the identity, but why we as Muslims were being treated that way. Where I've been raised in a faith that was so peaceful and loving. So that really led to my, pursuit of the degrees of political science and homeland security. That's what I double majored in for undergrad. But after that, I was just so put off. I was just so sick of politics. I was like, this is not for me. Yeah, okay, I understand the world and all of this a bit better, but it's very ugly and nasty, and I don't want to deal with that. And so I went into writing books, and I really enjoyed that until the Yemen conflict began. And a friend of mine who was a journalist took me out for coffee, and she said, Zainab, you have so many skills, and you can do so much. There's a lot of misinformation. The truth is going unheard. Nobody knows about Yemen. So you need to research this for yourself. And I think you can do great work in this. And that's what led me down this rabbit hole. And I realized that a lot of what we see in the media is not the truth. And a lot of it is hidden from our eyes. That is like important topics. And that, I would say, Yemen is my sole, I guess, factor for applying to journalism school for my master's and going down this path that I am. I think the truth led me where I am today.
That's really beautiful, especially, the way that you went where you kind of need to be. And we'll move in now to talking about, applying and getting into journalism school and what that sort of looks like in filmmaking, inshallah. Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry about that. So Zainab and Fatima, you took two different paths towards journalism. Zainab, you're doing a master's at Harvard International Security and Journalism. What does it take to be successful in journalism grad school, and what helped you get through it?
For me personally, I was very committed to, if I was going to go to school, I wanted to go to the best school because I really had this purpose in mind that I want to make change for our Muslim community. We've been marginalized far too long. There's so much misinformation about us. So it was just this one goal that pushed me through. Like just looking back at my journey now, of having the 3 children that I did amidst all this, the horrendous things I faced while traveling to school with the TSA and the checks, just everything that I've gone through. And I just look back and I think it was just this drive to go through school and give back to my community that I love so much and I respect so much. And I think it's time for the world to see the true side of us. I mean, the fact that me and Fatima have together founded an organization called the Muslim Journalists, just being so unapologetic. The way they frame Muslim women with veils is like oppressed, and it's like not at all. Like, we are 2 women who want to manage our households. It's been a struggle. I'm not going to say it's not been easy. Studying with children late at night, when you put them down to sleep, that's really all the time a mom has to herself. But it was really, I believe, definitely for me personally, was the hand of God that just helped me push through, and the support of my community. They really stood by me, my family, my husband. That was super important to me. And yeah.
Alhamdulillah, that's amazing. I have immense respect for that. So now, Fatima, you did an undergrad in journalism at the University of Toronto Scarborough and a diploma in journalism at Centennial College. Why did you choose to do both? And can you tell us about what each has to offer?
Forgot I was muted. So for the program that I applied to, it was journalism at U of T, and it was a joint program with Centennial College. So it was all together offered as one whole program that was around 4.5 years to 5 years, depending on when you finished your internships. So what both had to offer, I think, when I was in my first and second year of journalism, I was just sitting there in classroom, just shaking my legs nervously, like, let us go out there and start reporting and doing all of this. And then when we got into Centennial, that's when we did all of the hands-on work. We got to go out in the field. We got to really get our hands on, radio, television, really do everything that had to do with anything that has to do with journalism. But I'm not going to say it was easy. Just like Zainab said, I think it's important to highlight the struggles that we go through. During the first year of Centennial, when we had all of that hands-on work and when you gain the most experience. Right at the beginning, I was in a car accident with my family, and that caused sort of this, like, it put me back a little bit, because you're dealing with something, I think, psychologically, physically, and also trying to get your degree done. And it wasn't easy to manage, but alhamdulillah, we got through it. And I'm not going to say I was always with this fire in me as Zainab is. But I think it evolved over time. I think I was lost for a while because I didn't know where I could fit within this industry. And I think that's a struggle that we all have, is to really create that space for ourselves. And that's what, really we aim to do with TMJ as well.
Yeah, it seems like having a struggle always seems to make us stronger.
Yeah.
So finally, Reza, can you talk to us about some of the courses you had to take to prepare for a future in filmmaking and producing?
Sure. So with filmmaking, I know maybe many years ago, you would go through the process of apprenticeship and then certain kind of courses, and then you'd be hired by a studio. But the way that the industry is developed, and very much like journalism, you don't necessarily need to do a specific course. You just need to have certain talent and abilities, and then you need to be persistent. So if you're making a documentary, you need to be persistent, like a journalist, again, with the story that you want to get, with the individuals that you want to kind of interview. And with filmmaking fiction, so, feature films and so forth, you need to have the ability to, I would advise people who want to get into filmmaking, and I would advise people who are talented to get into filmmaking, but before they get in, they kind of realign their intentions. So they decide why they want to do it. Do they want to do it for the fame, for the money, or do they want to do it because they want to make a positive change to the world that they're living in? And so if they're going to go into filmmaking, they can get internships, they can get positions where they're kind of learning the trade in sometimes smaller studios, sometimes bigger production companies. and then from there they can go on to working on bigger projects and so forth and so on. So there, you don't need a specific qualification for film. However, the good thing about the fact that I did get my first initial master's degree in film production, that enabled me to apply for the PhD. So with that master's degree and the Islamic studies master's degree that I got a few years after that, I was in a way, I don't want to say qualified, but I was in a way prepared to bring the concept of the Muslim identity from one master's degree and the concept of cinema, put it together and try to explore that for a more specific PhD that's more in depth. So it benefited me in that sense, in a more academic, theoretical sense. But again, if you do want to get into films, and any of the audience, the youth or their parents are interested to do it in a way where it's beneficial and in a way that is, I don't want to say halal or haram, but in a way that is like guided in a positive way. If they want to reach out, I'm happy to advise them on places they can go through, the experiences they can get, and utilize that for filmmaking, documentary making. And you could just pick up a mobile and you can make a short video. That's what's happened now. Pick up a mobile, you have your laptop. Before you need to have like access to celluloid specific cameras and then an editing suite, talking about many years ago, obviously. But then that's changed so much now. You literally pick up a mobile. Even some mobiles, you can edit it on the mobile. So now there is, and Ridley Scott, famous British film director, he says there is no excuse if you want to make films, tell stories through films now. You can just pick up a camcorder, now obviously mobile, and you can tell stories. And that's what filmmaking is. It's telling stories.
Yeah, I guess with the innovation and technology in the 21st century, there's pretty much no excuses. Pretty simple.
Everyone's a filmmaker nowadays.
Yep. All right, so now we're just going to ask some questions about a typical day in the life of a filmmaker and or journalist. So we'll continue with Reza. All of us have probably seen a movie or a documentary in our lives, and they last probably an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. But that end product is just a small part of a much longer and elaborate behind the scenes process. Can you tell us about what goes into filmmaking, and what are some daily tasks that you do that most of us may not know or really have an appreciation for?
So I'll give you an example of a documentary that I'm working on. It's a feature documentary with Syed Hussein Makki, and it's been taking us 4 years to get to this point. We have all the interviews that we wanted. So we've done the production side. And in the production side, we had to chase individuals for sometimes a year and a half, just to get hold of them and get them to agree to do an hour interview. And there's been times where we had to travel halfway across the world. So we've traveled to Australia, we've traveled to Taiwan, we've traveled to Malaysia, America, to get these interviews and this kind of footage. And so that's just the 4 years of production. Then there comes the time of editing, which is post-production, adding, making a story out of all of this footage and narrative and interviews, and then adding the music to it and adding if there's any effects to it, and rearranging the edit so the story flows, it makes sense. It's not enough just that there's information or education in it. We also need to entertain the viewer, right? If I expect someone to give an hour and a half of their valuable time to watch something that I've made, I need to make them enjoy watching it. So not only just visually, but mentally as well. So there's a lot of process of ideas. It all starts with the idea. And this is really funny because the documentary that I was making with Syed Hussein, so I have, a good relationship with him, and he's like, I want to do this documentary. And I'm like, okay, fine. What's it about? So he kind of explained it to me, but I didn't understand what the concept was. So I said, okay, fine, I'll help you anyway. So a year or two later, he's getting a little bit like demoralized because it's really hard to keep at it, and it's your own funding and it's your own effort and you're on your own, there's no support. So then he's like, is it even worth doing it? And I was like, look, I didn't know what this documentary was, and I still don't know what this documentary is after a year and a half, but I'm in there with you because I trust you, I believe in you, and I know that at the end of it we'll get somewhere. So it's not about the destination for me right now, it's about the journey, about making something that will open up a discussion within the world about the concepts that we have within Islam. So we're interviewing Russell Brand, actor from England. We're interviewing Jordan Peterson, famous psychologist from Canada. Why? Because ultimately everything that we're discussing with them, a lot of it comes back to the root and the message that Islam has. So there is a purpose. So then he became moral, he became energetic again, and then we continued. And then 4 years on, and at one point I remember a couple of months ago, I said, I think I know what the documentary is about now. So sometimes it's not necessarily the destination, it's the journey, but you just need to make sure that you are aiming for something that's positive. So that's been one of the experiences that I had, is how to keep myself encouraged to continue, is to keep reminding myself why I'm doing it. And if the why at the beginning had a fault, it was materialistic reason for the why, it's very easy for you to give up. But as the sisters Zainab and Fatima there, what they do with the journalism is not about, oh, we just want to kind of work for Fox News or CNN and get famous. No, they want to make a change utilizing news and sharing of information and articles and writing and journalism. So the why makes a lot of difference in the how as well, and how you continue doing it, inshallah.
Yeah, it seems this commitment goes a long way, and we all pray that all of your efforts are rewarded, inshallah. So next, Fatima, if you don't mind, please describe for us a day in the life of a journalist as they prepare for a story or for an interview. I think just like filmmaking, we see the final products, but a lot is hidden behind the scenes.
So do you want journalism in the newsroom, or do you want journalism outside the newsroom? Because those are two completely different things.
Let's start with in the newsroom.
In the newsroom, you are surrounded with a lot of different people who are creating those stories. So there's this kind of like news buzz around you, and I think you get your motivation. Now, you'd think that it looks like the movies where everyone's running around doing stuff, but no, everyone's just sitting really at their desks, typing up, and they take like a long stretch and a break and a coffee break, come back to the desk and continue typing, searching for stories, just on the phone, looking for people online. And within the newsroom, it's very like, I think it fuels you. Outside of the newsroom, it's a little slower. I wouldn't say that the newsroom looks like what my office looks like at all. So when we're searching for different people for various shows, it really depends on the type of show. Like Raza was saying, you have a specific audience or a specific person or a specific, story that you need to tell. So you have to find the best guest for that. I think that's the hardest part, is to find those guests. And I think, Zainab, you can enlighten us a little bit more about that. Zainab tries to get a guest every single week for her Instagram Live. So I'm going to let her answer the rest of this question.
Sure.
Yeah, first of all, Brother Raza, I really respect what you do. My specialization is mostly in writing, but I did take a few film and documentary courses, and wow, my head was spinning, because I really think it's not meant for everyone, and you really have to be so patient. Like Reza said, it's about chasing those stories. Sometimes takes years, and just putting it all together. Listening for the visual. It is storytelling. And one of my greatest passions, and I think this is why it was easier for me to go into journalism, is because I love storytelling. Just from my blog that I have, I write stories pretty much every day. And just my head's always in a story. Like right now I'm thinking about my next book, and it's a kid's book, but it's like, how am I going to tell the story? Because pleasing children is so difficult. But once you get that, you really know how to tell a story. And the everyday life of a journalist, I can speak from a writing perspective, is that just like Reza said, you're really chasing stories. It's been very difficult in this pandemic, because you really are dependent on the phone and virtually. Before, I used to chase stories like on like site at the event, hey, what's going on? Tell me, how do you feel about this? I could go zoom over to the event sites or where things were happening, check it out. More investigative reporting was kind of my style. I loved feature reporting, where you pick one person to write a profile on and you just get to know everything about them. But now I've been writing hard news stories, and it's just been so difficult, to wait for the people to call you back. You keep calling them like that annoying bee. waiting at your desk, waiting that they call you back. But it's given me like a breadth of experience, I guess, in what I really like and what I'd like to write about. And like Fatima said, I have guests on my live pretty much every other day nowadays. And it does give you that insight as to how to, interview people, because it's a lot more than meets the eye. You have to do a lot of prep work, briefing, getting to know someone before you actually have them on, so that, it's not like right there, everyone's saying everything right then and there. It's really an end product with a lot of prepping. I actually investigate each of my guests. I look at everything they've written, pretty much get to know everything about them so that I know how to ask leading questions as a reporter. And that's what makes for a really great interview.
Definitely a lot more that goes into it than meets the eye.
And not everyone says yes. You'll ask so many people for interviews, and you're not going to get a yes from every single person. And in the newsroom, sometimes stories do fall through because you have to be timely. I think the luxury of doing things from your own platform or from your house is that you have that ability to sort of play with the time a little bit and make things relevant based on the guests that you're getting on. But in the newsroom, it's completely different. It's like you do this story or you're done, move on.
I think we're very used to failure, and I think failure or rejection is a great thing, and you have to be very comfortable with that as a journalist. You're not going to get everything. There are going to be dead ends. You're going to have to let a story go that you were so passionate about, and these are really hard things to swallow. But overall, it's a very, very fun and enjoy. Not fun. I don't know. Fun is maybe. It's a very high intensity, stress inducing career, but it's full of passion. And that's something, I think each of us has, even as filmmakers and journalists on here.
I think we're all addicted to the stress, right?
Can't be thin-skinned, basically.
Yeah.
So we should feel super privileged that you guys were so generous with, your responses to us and your time. So thank you again for being here with us today. Before going into, the joys of your different careers, I wanted to ask Fatima and Zainab. Fatima, we talked a little bit, before about, being professional Muslim women and being able to balance between our jobs and home life. So, question for you and Zainab is, how do you balance that, a job that's as demanding as journalism, while also helping, to build a healthy home and raise faithful children?
Well, Zainab has 3 kids. I don't have kids yet, unfortunately, but I don't know how she does it. I actually graduated and then I got engaged and married within like that span of 2 years. And it was, we got married during COVID, and then moving and coming to the States. I moved from Canada to the States. So it was a huge shift in my life where I literally just had to put everything on pause. And then alhamdulillah, I was able to meet Zainab coincidentally, and we sort of started TMJ, but we really did make a conscious decision that during this process of building this platform, we both know that we have a responsibility to our households, and this all comes first. And it's very nice and relaxing to know that, you can go to, let's say, your employer or whatever it is that you like, wherever you're working, you can go to the person and say, I need to do 1, 2, 3. I'm not able to finish this right now. And journalism is very demanding. It's not a career that you can just put aside. You really have to give it all of your time, especially if you're working on timely stories. But yeah, you have to you have to really manage your time well, and you have to make sure that you have days where they're just for yourself. And you do things that you really love.
I guess I can piggyback off of that.
Yes.
So for me, it was, I had my child before I even started my journalism journey. And I'm not gonna just put it mildly. For me, family has always been number one. I grew up with a stay-at-home mom who gave everything to her children, and for me, she's the most intelligent woman in my eyes, most beautiful, most, I guess, for me, my role model, like the present day role model. And I wanted always to be like her. And she always pushed me, to get, the best degrees and go out and achieve everything. But when it comes to family, your responsibilities to your husband and your children. So I was raised in a very traditional modern environment. I don't know how to kind of say that, but yeah, so I would consider myself a very traditional mom and wife. And it's definitely through the support of my family that I'm able to be who I am today. And I do think there is something to be said about someone who is able to give that time, but also has that kind of that passion and that purpose outside of just being a mom and a wife. And I think that's very important for women, especially. And if you can do that, with the support of your family, then why not? And I think that my biggest drive for my work is my children. They're so proud of me every time I'm going on live. They know, that mommy's going on live, or, she has work to do, or if I go to protest to cover an event, they're very, very happy. And, you can see that they're having these thoughts about looking up to something like that. And I do want to be that kind of role model for them. So yeah, but balancing everything has come down to time management. I really don't watch TV. I think that's it's my biggest weakness. I love, film. I love watching movies and shows, but that's just something that I've had to sacrifice among other things to be able to have time for the things that are important to me.
Yeah, it really is about priorities, and putting your family up there, on the list along with your career. Maybe you could just continue with Zainab and Fatima before we move on to Reza. So we talked a little bit about the challenges of your careers, and you can expand on that if there's something else you wanted to talk about. But what are the joys? What are the things that make you happy, or make you feel comfortable with what you're doing at the end of the day?
If you want to go first, Zainab?
Yeah, let's go with Zainab first.
Well, I don't know where to start. This is where my part comes in about convincing everyone to become a journalist, because we honestly do need a lot more, good-hearted journalists. I think that, right before actually, Fatima, you and I started TMJ, a colleague of mine from Harvard told me that, she's always wanted to do something good with her journalism career and, her abilities, but she just keeps getting sucked into this corporate mainstream media. And she just says, maybe one day when I build a name for myself, I'll do good work. And, that just put me in that place. So when this whole idea came to us about TMJ, I was like, I don't want to go down that path where I have to build a name for myself and then do good work. For me as a Muslim, it's always going to be about good work. It's always going to be about truth. Like Imam Hussein for us is a huge inspiration. Bibi Zainab, I consider herself as an amazing journalist who told a story that could have otherwise gone untold. And so for me, these inspirations from my faith are, I think, the great parts about journalism is that I think it fits so well with what we've been taught as, a Muslim society, is to always pursue truth, speak about truth, even if it goes against yourself and your own family and loved ones. And there's so much, like if I as a journalist could tell people how much misinformation there's out there and how much mix of truth and falsehood there is, which makes even for more dangerous news, I think, than not having anything at all. And just stories that are just going uncovered. We definitely need more good, truth-seeking journalists who can also make a great career. I hope that Fatima and I can make a great career out of TMJ, being women in our households and still pursuing a great career for ourselves. And I think that it's definitely something to be looked at, because you are going to wake up with a purpose every day. And I think in these pandemic times, we have realized now more than ever that success needs to be redefined. It's really waking up with that sense of purpose and wanting to do good in the world that's going to keep you fueling for your journeys.
For me, I think it's being able to really speak to individuals and get their stories. I think we all talk to people and we all obviously, hear interesting stories, but being able to bring those stories to a different platform and have others listen in on conversations. I think we have this like thing within us. Even when we watch movies, we like to see into other people's lives. And it's really interesting. Journalism really brings real people to the forefront. Um, not all stories are covered in a fair way. And I think that is one of the drives that really pushed me and really like sets that fire within me to continue doing the work that we're trying to do, even though it is overwhelming. I think we all know that going into this career, it's hard. You're not going to have very fun experiences. I was reflecting on this morning just on like my experiences with different news organizations and within the newsrooms, and just how people don't say anything. They're very polite. Canadians are extremely polite, but it's just, that like, you have this story to tell and you present it to them and they don't understand where you're coming from and you can't find a place to fit it. And I think that was my biggest issue. So I think the thing that I'm grateful for is now I have a space to actually tell these stories, because that's what we all want to do. We want to bring forward our perspectives from our cultures and our communities, and especially our Shia identity as well. I think that's important to raise.
Yeah, I love that, Zainab, you talked about truth being your driver, and Fatima, you're looking for sort of what's the best way to, to do what is right in terms of, your own community and your own faith and your identity. So it's really going back to yourselves and making sure, you're comfortable with what you're doing and that what you're doing is really the right thing, beyond just yourselves and what's going to bring you fame and glory. And a name in journalism. Moving to Riza, when I think of filmmaking, I'm inspired and awed, by how producers and editors can take all these separate pieces of film and put them together into a story that, audiences can appreciate and learn from. And, just by what you guys have talked about today, obviously that respect has gone up a lot more. But at the same time, it seems like a lot of hard work, which you also talked about. So I'm wondering, you talked a little bit about the struggles. What are the best parts of filmmaking for you, and what are the highlights?
I think before I talk about myself, I made some points about what I want to say about the sisters Zainab and Fatima. And I think as Muslim women who are practicing and with hijab, they should be praised, honestly. I'm just listening to them and thinking that for me as a man, as a Muslim man, maybe some challenges, but I know as, well, I don't know, I'm not a woman, but as a Muslim woman, the fact that you have hijab and you're in a society that's supposed to show you respect, but there is underlying points where they don't, and there's issues. However, they haven't given up on their families. They have the respect for their families, their children, their husbands, their parents. And that for me is just like, that needs to be praised by all the men, needs to be praised by the whole community. They should be supported. They should be encouraged. There should be role models for other girls coming from our community who live in America and Canada and UK and Australia and everywhere, to see them and say, look, if they're doing it while they're juggling their marriage life, while they're juggling 3 children, which is just amazing. I can do it as well, right? So I can maintain that healthy relationship and healthy motherhood and sisterhood and so forth. But I also can have something, I have a voice that I can add to this tapestry of identity we have as Muslims. And I want to also say to our Muslim brothers who are not married yet, or the ones who are about to get married, or the ones who are married, that if you do see the person that you're seeking to marry, and they want to go down the path of either media or another career that is adding, for example, my wife, she's a dentist, but she also head of a charity for 7 years. No one ever sees her face. She never talks about it. But I say it because she's too humble. And the fact that she does all of that and juggle the life, married life and looking after family and just your own, well-being and everything, and being a dentist, it's just the respect I have for these women. We all the men within our community, have to constantly keep praising and reminding and saying how amazing they are. So having said all of that, and my hat's off to you guys, just I think the fact that I make a story, I put a story together, from all the stories that we film in one documentary or a film, and it has a positive impact, and it makes someone, for example, I documentaries I made about ziyarat, so the visitations to Iraq and Iran and Hajj and so forth, and people watched it and said that inspired us to go and to perform ziyarah. So for me, but someone else might be different. For me, that was the highest form of praise or the highest form of reward I can get. If I put, a month into making one documentary and it encouraged one person to physically leave the comfort of their home and go to another part of the world where it's not necessarily comfortable or safe, and that connection of spirituality between that individual and God through the teachings of Ahlul Bayt and through the visitation of them has then changed their life, in which when they will return, they will change the people around them. And when I was younger, I used to think, all right, I want to make a film and win the Oscar so I can go on the podium and say, Allahu Akbar. And then time passed, and then I grew up and I matured, and I said, no, that's not why I do what I do anymore. So my intention changed. My intention was like, through this film, I want to touch someone's heart and mind and move them. And I don't care if anybody in this world acknowledges it or even lets me know, or I get praised for it, or I get awarded for making something nice. As long as I know and God knows, that's enough for me. So for me, filmmaking has not, I do make programs that I want people to enjoy watching, but ultimately it's become a form of sadaqah jari, or my kind of khairat, or the kind of charity that I want to do, in the sense that not charity for other people, but for myself. So it's become a way of me gathering as much good deeds as I can. And so when I leave this world, I don't go empty handed. So that's why the stuff that I want to make falls within the parameters of encouraging people to be thoughtful, to be spiritual towards God, and just self-reflective, and so forth and so on. So like the work that the sisters are doing, or scholars that do when they write books, and inshallah I'll write books as well, and I do some journalism. But anything that I do, I want it to be in a way where if I leave and it's there for maybe 10, 20, 50 years on YouTube, God knows if YouTube will be around then, but wherever it is and someone sees it, they benefit from it. And then I won't be ashamed. So when I meet my creator in front of me, like, okay, you made that and you made good money and you got the golden statue. But do you know when someone watched that, they were misguided and X, Y, and Z? Because that for me, ultimately, everything I do, even in being married or relationship, everything has to lead me to the final point is I'm going to be in front of God and I have to answer for all of this. Am I going to be ashamed and I have to quickly ask for intercession? Or I'm going to be happy that I've done some good and the good is shown in front of me? So it's a little bit funny what I've said, and a little bit like kind of like spiritual and all of that stuff. But honestly, I see that everything that we do, if you look at it in that holistic context, then you're kind of guided in the right direction of not making mistakes and doing something that is positive and of good. And it could be, and always add creativity to it, and add intelligence to it, and add a fresh look to it. And that's why I said I encourage and I praise the sisters, because I really want to hear their voice about news and topics and issues, because I've heard a lot of Muslim men's voices, and inshallah we'll hear more. But I need to learn the journey that the women within our community have through all the difficulties they've gone, what they've seen, because I know I will learn from them. So that's why I look forward to reading from them and learning and watching stuff from them. So yeah, that's a short answer.
Yeah, no, I love that. That was so beautiful. Yeah, when you were talking, I was like, Sadaqah Jariyah, that's what these films are, you know. A lot of people when they think of filmmaking, you know, their mind goes to Hollywood and Bollywood. You know, it's not, you know, how can I leave something that people will watch forever, that, you know, will impact myself and my children and generations going forth. And, they say that, what goes on the internet stays on the internet. And so, it's the same thing for movies and for podcasts and, all these different types of media. So it's a perfect lead into the next segment. There's a lot of, and this question is for Riza, there's tons of movies and TV shows about prophetic and Islamic histories. They're both entertaining and educational. You talked a little bit about this, but can you expand a little bit more about how you incorporate Islam into the work you do, and how filmmaking can be used to promote a positive Muslim identity?
So I think that we have the usual kind of educational Muslim programs that we have on numerous YouTube channels and Muslim channels that broadcast as well. However, I think there is an area which is growing in the form of universalizing the message of Islam, which it has always been. However, we remove the shackles of culture and certain lenses that we've attached from each background that we have. So, for example, Iranian say background, British background, or Pakistani, or Khoja, or Iraqi, or whatever, and just removing the core message. The core message of it all starts with Tawheed, which is the unity and the oneness of God. And I like something that Sister Zainab said, and I think it's beautiful, and I would use it in future, is being a God-centric in providing news information. There is a lot of liberal-centric. There's a lot of left-centric. But where do we fall as Muslims, right? So we have identity that is shared, some identity with people who are conservative and right-wing. But then we have some identity that is shared and values that are shared with left-wing. And we think, okay, we've got to be left. No, we've got to be right. So we stuck. No, we have this beautiful thing that Sister Zainab said is God-centric. And that God-centric would work with most people because most values are towards making society better. And so coming with that attitude of saying, okay, I want to make a film, but outside of, say, the context of Hollywood and Bollywood, which is capitalism and making money, and injected into that is ideology and the culture that it's made in, which is unfortunately in America a little bit white supremacist, anti-Muslim culture. We have to be honest. Not that all Americans are like that, but it's a culture that exists in the system of America. I take myself away from that. I want to make something that is God-centric. Now, that doesn't mean it's something about just the Holy Prophet or the Imams or the saints or a religion. No, it could be a story about a man and a woman who fall in love. But you make it with the context of, does that story then bring me closer to understanding my relationship with God? So if I start with that, when I make something with that premise, and I do want to make it entertaining, I do want people to enjoy watching it to the extent where if they enjoyed watching it, they'll come back and watch it a second time or a third time, as opposed to just being information. I start with that premise, then the way the values and the stories that I write and tell will be slightly different. However, does it have core values of respect, compassion, mercy, love, living in harmony? All of these things that most religions, if not all religions, have, is I can bring those in. And I for example, I work with a director in Iran, a short film director and feature film director and a TV director. Very talented guy. Has amazing films. You can view them on my YouTube channel. And I go to him, and the stuff when I discuss with him and the interviews that I translate for him for different Canadian organizations, different people, his stories is always about the importance of motherhood, the love of fatherhood, the respect for mother, the mercy of a mother towards a child, the disparity between the rich and the poor, the things that I share. And you don't even have to have the Farsi language, because some of them there's not even dialogue in it. You watch it, and at the end of it ends up making you cry. Why? Because it touches the humanity. And by touching that in our journalism, in our filmmaking, documentary making, storytelling, all of these things, we're trying to transfer this energy and this ideas of kind of positive ideas to the other person, either being through the voice when you're face to face, or through media online or TV or cinema, that you're trying to make them understand something to make them better. So when we educate them about the plight of the Yemeni, it's so that, yes, they help the people in Yemen, but also they become better themselves. So then when they see injustice, they say this is wrong. It's not just about one specific issue. It's by making them realize that specific issue represents certain ideas. How is the message of Imam Hussein lasted for 1,350 years? Not because he rose up to fight or defend or whatever a specific ruler for a specific, no, his message was message of universal value. And it obviously, with the love that we have, and the as Sister Zainab said, being almost the first Muslim journalist, and Sister Zainab was the mass media of that time. That's why we love her so much, is because the Imam Hussein, if Sayyidah Zainab hadn't discussed what happened, if she wasn't the media that she was, the eloquence that she had of like her father, the bravery she had to go and stand up against these men who just slaughtered her family and children, all of that she did, nobody would have known what happened to Imam Hussein except the version that they put out. She revived, so she's part of that Imam Hussein's legacy. And so that was so universal. And so when we make something, documentary or film, we have to look at it in that lens. And when we do, our work becomes so beautiful and so amazing. There's no problem going and working in Hollywood. But then if you go there with the intention of just, and I think we were discussing this earlier, is like if someone wants to go into media, like a young person now, or a person listening to this, you can get into media and you can do stuff that is not haram. So if you want to make films or documentaries, you can do all of that, but you need to make sure, I need to make sure when I go in, maybe that's one of the reasons why God wanted me to start late, is that my character had formed. So like Sister Zainab said, I'll become famous, and when I'm famous, then I'll talk about Islam. By that time, you've sold yourself to the devil and everyone else, and it's too late. You won't do it because you're so comfortable with what you're receiving in this environment. You're not going to do that. But if you from beginning say, no, I'm going to go in and I'm going to face all the challenges, but my intention is to do good and to stick within the shar and the etiquettes of Islam. And then if you will, and inshallah, you will be successful to the point where you will be able to make a living, you will be able to provide for a family because other people are doing it. Yeah. So if we don't go in and start that kind of ball rolling of changing the narrative and dialogue and providing environment for muhajjabas and Muslim people in the mainstream media, they are not going to give us that space. We need to go and request that space.
Yeah, and I love everything that you talked about. There's so much in there, and I mean I've watched a lot of different historical films, and they've had an impact on me. For example, the Nebi Yusuf TV show. You know, the impact that had on me, I'm not sure I would have gotten through a book. But you know, I even remember there was like a minute clip of a video. I think it was actually Iranian, and it was a minute, but it was so powerful, and it just showed an everyday kind of scene. You know, there was a husband and wife, and they sat down to eat, and the husband just had, you know, just one spoon of his soup, and I guess there was no salt in it. But instead of telling his wife, you know, like, why didn't you put salt, or like, you know, this doesn't taste very good, he was like, can you just go and get me something from the kitchen? So she went and got him something from the kitchen, and while she was gone, he just put a little bit of salt in her plate and in his plate, and, you know, and when she came back, they just sat and ate. So it's like the simplest little interaction, but it shows, you know, it gives an example of how a relationship looks like beyond, you know, what Hollywood shows us, or what masculinity and femininity are supposed to mean in this Western context. And again, it was just a minute, and yeah, I still remember it for years after. So I think there's definitely lots of room for, you know, even after, like, even other than historical films to make an impact on Muslims. So Zainab and Fatima, again, going back to that God-centric lens that you both use, can you tell us about how this lens shapes the journalism that you do? And maybe we'll start with Zainab and then move on to Fatima.
So I actually wasn't always very proud of my identity. I know that's very hard for anyone to believe who knows me or who knows my work. You know, I come out as, oh yes, I'm a very proud Shia Muslim. But I didn't grow up like that, you know, especially after 9/11, I was very shy, very reserved. And, You know, I wanted to kind of be invisible from the world. I didn't want to have any voice. I just wanted to go through the day not having my hijab pulled, or not being shoved into a locker, or, you know, like, it was just like, I just wanted to survive. I was just about surviving. Um, and I remember just watching something about Muhammad Ali. I'm sure, you know, it's weird for a woman to say it, but, you know, for me, I think when I saw Muhammad Ali, I was like, why is this man, it's not just about his boxing. It's, you know, he's just so proud of his faith. And what does this man have? And I just went down this, like, researching as a child, that, you know, I want to have that confidence. I want to have this. So why don't I have it? And it really came from learning. When I talk about learning, you know, when Imam Ali says, like, know your faith, don't just inherit it. And I think a lot of us Muslims inherit our faith. You know, I come from a very, you know, religious family who are strong Muslims, but I never felt that I was very connected to my faith until I started learning it for myself. So I started taking classes as a teenager, just, you know, how, like, courses online with instructors. I had a tutor. I was 14 years old when I had a tutor, and I would go to her house every day. And I think as I grew closer to my faith, I think that everything started changing for me. And when I realized that the power is with God, it's not with people or what they think of you, or, you know, your opinions, their opinions don't matter about your life. It's about pleasing him and living your path. And like Brother Reza said, leaving behind something that's eternal. You know, we love and know God by his work. His work is creation, what we see in front of us. We understand him through his work. And, you know, a lot of what's going on today is very, you know, borderline or even self-worship. You know, people are just about selfies and their looks, and it's like very overwhelming and very scary for our world that we live in. So for me, everything became about work and what I'm leaving behind, sadqa jariya. So I think that even today, like, people who follow my work, most of the people on my platforms are non-Muslim or Sunni Muslim, even though they know I'm Shia, very openly Shia. So I found that very interesting, that, you know, when you live your light and when you're so unapologetic, because you are reliant on the source that created everyone, then everything else stops mattering, and you just want to live for his pleasure. And I think that that became very essential to my work, why I am who I am, where I am. And I always, like, this is my dua every day, is that God just guide me where you want me to be. You know, I'm not perfect, I have so many mistakes, but just lead me to where you want my work to matter.
It's about that the journey just as much as it is, you know, or maybe more than it is about that final product. And Fatima, how does that God-centric lens sort of motivate you to do the work that you do?
I always forget. I was just writing down some notes. First of all, thank you so much, Rizal, for your kind words. I think it's so important to just thank you for that, because, you know, it was a really hard time getting into this field for both of us, Zainab and I, within even, like, especially within this time of toxic masculinity within our cultures, trying to like stay away from that toxicity. And I think it's important to say that without people like you, I don't think we would be where we are. Our husbands are huge supports, pushing us towards this work. Our families are really, really great supports as well. Like, without our families and our supportive husbands, we can't be on screen doing what we're doing, because we get a lot of backlash. We get a lot of people saying, like, oh, you're in hijab. Do you really think you can make it in the news? You're in this industry. Oh, you want to get into this industry? And with that, like, underlying you. So I think, thank you so much. Just, that's all I wanted to say for you. And you guys were asking how I manage my time. I'm actually just, I have a show after this, the Winter Talk Show, and I'm corresponding with people throughout. So that's how you manage your time. You multitask. But Anyways, Rida, you raised an important point about touching the humanity within us. And I think our religion is all about humanity. And to go back to this God centricism that you were asking about, Huda, our lives are God centric. We pray, we fast, we read our du'as. Everything that we do and practice as Muslims is God centric. So why wouldn't our work be? I think we have to find that balance of translating our own beliefs into our work lives. And I do the You Mentor talk show where I speak to Shia professionals. And a lot of what the advice that they give to our youth is to really be truthful to yourself and your identity and your core. Even if you need to ask to pray within, this big corporation that you work in, take that 5-minute prayer, because that's what's going to give you that success, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the ability to help you when you are asking him for it. I was the only one that was wearing hijab when I was growing up in school, in my classes. A lot of the times I used to get a lot of backlash from my own community for being too religious. So I used to think, why would I be accepted outside if they're not going to accept me within my own community? And I think that's something that Zainab and I want to bring up within TMJ, is to talk about the stuff that goes on within our communities that are very hard for us to go through, especially within this Western society that we live in, where we are lost. Like Reza said, you mentioned that, we have this split identity, basically. We all have a different part of us, which is our cultures. And then we have this Western part of us, which lives here and was raised here in these countries, whether it be Canada or the US. So I think it's important to always come back to our core, who we are, and translate that into our work and whatever we're doing. Inshallah, Zainab and I can work towards doing that in TMJ as well. It's not easy work, but we are trying to our best to even raise raise awareness on the Shia genocide that's happening, which Zainab can talk about a bit more.
I was just gonna say that, with Shia genocide, something that really kills me, especially as an activist. It's just, I can't. And, what just happened recently just adds to that. And I was just talking to Fatima, it's like, I've been trying to research information that has all of the data together so that I can actually speak about it. And there is not, a very centralized, like a system for the data on Shia genocide. And for me, that's like, as a journalist, I'm like, how am I going to even do any work if there's no information out there and nobody's really commissioned any kind of reports or done any kind of investigative journalism or reporting on this issue? And that needs to change. So it's like one of the many issues Fatima and I are talking about, is that inshallah we can bring change in that sector. And anyone who's watching, we need a lot of good journalists. That's why I'll keep going back to that, because there are journalists who, talk about things that are already being talked about. And I always say that's gossip, talking about the wedding, the babies that the royal family is having, that's all gossip. That's not news. The dolphins that are, in Palestine, meanwhile, I know a story that got killed for Palestine because they wanted to report a dolphin in Miami. Like, imagine, that's the disparity of human lives that we have. And I think that we really need to change that, especially as journalists, especially those who belong to the Shia faith. There needs to be a lot more work. And it's time that we tell our stories and take our narratives back.
And quickly on that point, I think when we hear, with what happened in the States recently, we hear, oh, America looks like Syria now. America doesn't look like Syria, because Syria shouldn't look like that. There's so much, everything is filtered through that Western lens. And I think that's what we're trying to break, even just all of us within our storytelling, whether it be me, Zainab, or Rida. I think we're trying to get past this Western ideology that's instilled within everyone, this whiteness that we don't relate to. So just trying to move past this and break that sort of barrier, and be true to ourselves.
just, yeah, so much respect for not only just covering stories that other people don't want to cover, but for doing it as Muslims, number one, and as Muslim women who are visibly Muslim and who don't just get backlash from outside communities, but within their own communities as well, which is very, very difficult as well. So hats off to you guys, and alhamdulillah that we have role models like you guys. So I'd like to move into audience questions because we are getting to the end of our time. I guess quickly, for Riza, what kind of degree or major did, I think you talked about this a little bit, but what kind of degree or major would you recommend for someone wanting to go into the film industry after high school or after undergrad?
So education is quite expensive, right? So you're looking at tens of thousands in Canada or America, and even in the UK, for 1 year, you're looking at £9,000, which is about 13,000 US dollars. Now, if you multiply that by 3 years for a bachelor, that's a lot of money, right? You don't really come out with a certificate like a dentist or a doctor that says, right now I can go and practice in a hospital. It doesn't work like that. You come out with some knowledge of the 3 years. When I spoke to people and experiences that I had, I could have got that 3 years experience, invested instead of, £30,000 or £27,000, invested £2,000 per short film, got the same amount of experience as making a short film or a documentary. So if someone genuinely is at the age where they have to decide if they want to go to university or they want to make film, that's fine. My advice is, if you have the money, fine, go. But if you don't have the money and you're 50-50 about going into filmmaking or documentary, but you want to have a degree that will give you solid background to do something else in case you want to be a teacher or something else, do a subject like English literature or something other than necessarily filmmaking. And this is someone who's done media for a degree and someone who's done media for bachelor's and is doing media for PhD, right? So if you don't want to go into academia, don't worry about the bachelor side too much. Maybe take 1 year out. That's all you need, 1 year. Go to some local film schools and participate. Maybe you spend a couple of $1,000s, couple of £1,000 for 1 year, take a gap year, and then you do it. And if you feel like, you know what, I'm happy to go through the hardship of having a few years of learning lesson to learn how to make films and not necessarily make a great income until I make films and until I make those connections and experiences, 1 year you'll know. If at the end of the year you like, you know what, filmmaking is not for me, it's really hard work, I don't have the creativity, I don't have the drive, I thought it's something I want to do, but I'm just enjoy watching movies, I don't enjoy making them, you saved yourself 30, 40, 50, $60,000. You spent a year and you've gained experience. And then when you're 19 or whatever, then you can decide to go and do some things that you really want to do. So for me, media, you don't necessarily need a degree. However, if someone wants to get a degree, my advice is to go through this process of elimination. Make sure you really want to do it and then go and spend that money, because education is not cheap at the moment, especially in America, especially in the West. And if you at the end of it don't have a qualification that can enable you to do many other things, you have to be careful what you invest your money and your time. Even time is more important than money and time into. So at the end of it, you've kind of got multiple options. I would advise people, if they're young, to go. There's loads of film courses you can go. You can find them online all across America, UK, Canada. Obviously, there's COVID now. Inshallah, the COVID will, with the vaccines, will become a little bit under control, so you can participate. And then you'll know if you really want to get involved and do it. And then I didn't know I was going to get into academia and utilize my media. But if someone has such foresight that from the age of 18, they know at 25, 6, 7, they're going to be a lecturer, they want to get into academia, do a PhD, by all means, then go and do the media in a theoretical way. So you have that. But practically, I remember when I did the 1 year one, the master's degree one, I learned how to make films. I learned how to write about films and essays and stuff. But I realized I learned more when I came out because I was forced to learn, right? I got to do this. I have a little bit of background for my master's, but how do I do X, Y, and Z? How do I manage? A lot of it is to do with management. I would say 20% of filmmaking is creativity, 80% is management of your time, resources, money, ability to get to X, Y, and Z, and how am I going to get that footage, and who will help me with this, and will my budget enable me to do that, and so forth and so on. So 80% is stuff that is not really, like in film school, when you come out, they don't teach you budget management, crew management, psychology, if someone is, all of that stuff that you need to have to be able to manage someone on a film crew. So that's something that you will probably gain more if you practice it through the means that I said, so you don't kind of waste a lot of money, you gain the experience.
All right, and then I think we have one question for Zainab and Fatima.
Yeah, so Zainab and Fatima, just last question. What advice do you have for youth currently looking to gain experiences to kind of pave their way into your field?
Fatima, you want to take this one?
Sure. So there's several pathways someone can take. I think now with our phones, like we have citizen journalists everywhere. We are able to write stories. I think first of all, start a blog, start sharing your work. Throughout school, you're gonna have a lot of experiences that will, if you do a program that is more hands-on, I think university is a little different. But I think Zainab as well, with your master's program, you had a lot of hands-on work as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So with these kinds of programs, it's a little different than just like a strict university program where you're just learning from books. You can't learn from books. You need that hands-on experience, like Rosa mentioned as well. So whatever path you do choose to take, make sure that you're really being active and aware of every story you're writing. Sometimes we go through things in life just, I think, unconsciously, and we keep going through them just because it becomes a routine. I think be conscious about everything that you write, every story that you create, because it will make an impact in the future and you will be proud of it. Write things that you are proud of. In terms of landing internships, I mean, it wasn't very hard to land internships, especially if you do have like teachers' recommendations and you are a student who, works hard, and you have that passion. All they want to see is that you have passion. So going into internships, it won't be easy at first. I remember walking into the National Post thinking, oh, great, the interns make the whole entire POC scale. Like we're the only people of color there, and everyone else was white. So it's a process where you have to sort of break that wall and get through. But when you do get those internships, when you do get into those fields, really make the best of it, because every single experience that you have will lead you to where you need to be in the future, inshallah.
And I think just to add to that, like journalism is very multifaceted. Like that, it's not just, if you don't want to write, there's film. If you don't want to film, there's food blogging, there's travel, there's multimedia, there's copywriting. So journalism and communications is not just about politics. Not many people like that. I don't like that. So it's you can really find a space for yourself if journalism's a career that you can easily get very, very passionate about, and it can suck you in. And that's the point I wanted to make earlier, is that I feel like family for me, my husband, my kids, just my community, is not a hindrance to my career. It's actually keeping me grounded, because I'm the type that would just go in running, and it can really suck you in because it's never ending. The news cycle never ends. Things are always going to be happening. And I think having the family has really kept me focused and breathe, and things will be there for you the next day and the next day. And so I think it is a very fun and passion-inducing career, and you can really find a space for yourself. You just have to research, what your passions are, and like Reza said, you don't want to put the time and money unless you're sure that this is something you're going to be passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So unfortunately, that does bring us to the end of this panel. Thank you so much to all three of you, our wonderful panelists, for sharing your experiences and knowledge with us. We have immense respect for all that you've done, and we genuinely pray that Allah accepts your efforts and rewards you for them. Of course, thank you to the audience for tuning in, as always. We hope that you were able to get a glimpse into the life of a journalist and filmmaker and have gained a greater appreciation for these very important careers. Our next panel event will be tomorrow at the same time, 10:20 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be talking to three accomplished Hausa students and teachers. Check out our Instagram page at Career Panel, where we post all the information you need to know about upcoming panels, as well as amazing coffee and tea tutorials and recipes by Sarah's Kitchen, made especially for this event. Thank you again for tuning in, and see you tomorrow, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.